October 17th, 1184, 3:12 a.m., northern France. Mist coils above the valley like ghostly fingers, drifting between the trees and over the silent waterway, feeding the old grain mill. Beyond the darkness, the distant clatter of armored hooves trembles through the earth, faint but growing. Étienne the Miller stands barefoot on the wooden spillway, breath steaming in the cold air, hands gripping the iron lever that controls the mill race. His heart thumps so loudly he can almost hear it echo against the stone walls. Below him, the mill pond is swollen from 3 days of rain. Black water sloshes against the retaining boards. One wrong move and the entire structure could burst. Étienne stares down at the floodgate, knuckles white. This isn't what millers do. They grind grain, mend wheels, curse the weather. But tonight, he is about to break the valley in half. A distant trumpet blares the enemy signal. The invaders are forming for the march. He glances down the slope toward the castle road. It's barely visible through the fog, but he knows exactly where it curves, where the ruts are deepest, where the soil is softest. He has walked that road every day of his life. And the thought hits him again. No one will believe this worked. Not even the knights inside the castle. Étienne closes his eyes for one long breath. He can still hear the words of Sir Roland the Castellan. Hold the gate, belay them if you must. A command given casually, almost dismissively, as though nothing a miller could do would matter. But Étienne saw what the nobles didn't. The natural shape of the land, the clogged stream, the crumbling banks. Water was a patient army, and tonight he was its commander. The ground trembles. The enemy vanguard is close now. Torches appear through the trees, flickering orange specks scattered across the edge of the valley. Then more and more, until the entire ridge glows like a river of fire. An army, hundreds of knights, siege towers, supply wagons. The full might of Lord Savaric the Red, the man who burned 6 villages on his march toward this castle. Étienne grips the lever tighter. A whispered thought brushes him. If I'm wrong, they'll hang me before sunrise. But there is no more time. The first armored riders descend the slope toward the road. Their horses clank under the weight of iron barding. Wagons creak. The massive siege tower rolls like a wooden giant pulled by 30 men straining in unison. Étienne watches them reach the road. The perfect choke point. Right where he needs them. A torchlight glints off a knight's helmet. The enemy is here. Étienne pulls the lever. The gate slams open with a scream of metal. The mill pond exhales violently. A wall of dark water erupts downward, roaring through the mill race like a living creature finally unleashed. The flood hits the valley floor with thunder, swallowing grass, stones, and the first section of road in a foaming surge. The knights never see it coming. Horses rear as the wave crashes into them, knocking riders sideways. The ground beneath their hooves dissolves into instant mud. Wheels vanish. Men shout. Torches sputter out. The siege tower groans, its heavy frame sinking as the water gushes around its wheels, softening the earth into a sucking mire. Étienne staggers back from the force of the release, drenched by cold spray. For a heartbeat, he doubts himself. But then he hears it. Chaos. Pure, unstoppable chaos. One knight screams as mud swallows his leg up to the knee. Another curses as his horse collapses into the mire. The leading wagons tilt and spill, barrels crashing into the flood. The valley road, the invaders' lifeline, has become a trap. And still the water comes. Étienne watches in stunned awe as the wave spreads, widening, deepening, turning the once solid road into a swamp of his own making. The enemy forces thrash in the darkness, falling into the mud, dropping shields, slipping, cursing, choking. It's working. His insane, impossible idea is actually working. But he has no time to celebrate. A second horn call echoes through the valley, deeper, angrier. The enemy commander has realized something is wrong. And soon, the full weight of the army will press forward into the flood. Étienne looks at the raging water and feels the first flicker of fear. What if the torrent isn't enough? What if the knights fight through it anyway? Because now the valley belongs to him. But he knows the storm he unleashed has only just begun. The horn echoes again, harsher, closer, rolling through the valley like a warning to everything still standing. Étienne grips the wooden railing of the spillway, rain-soaked hair clinging to his forehead as he peers down into the chaos he has unleashed. The water is no longer a wave. It is a force. It surges through the valley road in swirling brown currents, chewing up the dirt track that Lord Savaric's army believed would carry them straight to the castle gate by dawn. Now, instead of marching in triumph, the vanguard is trapped in a rising swamp, armor sinking, horses flailing, curses filling the night. You can almost feel the panic spreading. One knight tries to wrench his destrier free, but the horse's legs are buried in muck up to the fetlocks. A second rider dismounts and immediately sinks to his thigh. A third is thrown violently as his horse loses footing and crashes sideways into the flood. Étienne watches torches fall one by one, swallowed by the water and mud. But the enemy is far from beaten. Lord Savaric the Red gallops into view at the ridge above the valley, his crimson cloak streaming behind him, helm crowned with iron spikes like a warlord from some ancient legend. Even through the mist, Étienne can see the fury in the man's posture. Savaric reins in sharply, surveying the chaos with disbelief. Étienne braces himself. Because Savaric is not the kind of commander who retreats. He is the kind who breaks men or breaks the world trying. With a single sweep of his sword, he signals his captains. Push forward. More knights descend the slope. Infantry follow, shields raised. Teams of men strain at the ropes of the siege tower, trying to yank it through the rising mire. Étienne can hear the grinding, the groaning wood, the men shouting, "Pull, pull, damn you!" Mud sprays, ropes snap. The tower lurches forward, a monstrous silhouette swaying like a drunk giant. Étienne's stomach twists. If they drag that tower out, the castle will fall by morning. He races along the spillway toward the secondary gate, a smaller sluice feeding a shallow channel. His sandals slap against wet stone. Rain, cold and sharp, needles his face. Étienne's mind races faster than his feet. More water. They need more water. Behind him, a knight breaks free of the mud with a triumphant roar, slogging forward step by brutal step. Others try to follow, using lances as poles, stabbing them into mud for leverage. Horses rear and kick, desperate to find solid ground. Étienne reaches the secondary lever. His hands slip. He wipes them on his tunic, plants his feet, and pulls. Nothing. The mechanism is old, older than him, older than the castle. Rust binds the hinge like iron sinew. Étienne grits his teeth, muscles straining, feeling the cold bite of wood digging into his palms. "Move," he whispers. "Move." With a sudden crack, the lever gives way. A second flood erupts from the auxiliary mill race, joining the first in a churning surge that doubles the pressure against the valley floor. The water level rises almost instantly up to the horses' chests, then higher. The men dragging the siege tower lose footing. One is swept off his feet and pulled into the muck. A captain screams for ropes. Another demands the men brace the wheels. But it's too late. With a groaning roar, the siege tower tilts dangerously forward, its weight shifting onto softened ground. Étienne holds his breath. The huge wooden frame slides, sinks, tips again, then collapses onto its side with a thunderous crash, sending a spray of mud and shattered timbers across the valley. Savaric's troops freeze in horror. Étienne suddenly becomes aware of voices behind him. By God, it's the miller. What is he doing? He turns to see several of Sir Roland's knights standing near the mill bridge, watching the devastation unfold below. Their helmets gleam faintly with reflected firelight. Their expressions range from awe to outright disbelief. One mutters, "A peasant did this." Another whispers, "The valley has turned against them." As if by sorcery. Étienne shakes his head. No sorcery, just water. Just timing. Just one man desperate enough to act. But there is no time for their awe, because the storm is not finished. Lightning splits the sky, illuminating the valley in a white flash that freezes every figure in stark silhouette. In that instant, Étienne sees something that chills him more than any rain or fear. Savaric is still coming. The warlord dismounts, slams his gauntlets into the sinking mud, and begins forcing his way forward on foot. His captains follow, shields up, faces twisted with fury. Étienne watches them fight through the rising flood, and a terrible thought claws at him. What if even this isn't enough, because an army is drowning? And yet the man leading it does not stop. Savaric lifts his sword and roars, not in defeat, but in challenge. The castle is still ahead. The road is ruined. But he intends to reach those gates. Water be damned. Étienne feels a jolt of dread. The flood bought time, but not victory. The ground shakes as thunder rolls overhead, drowning out the shouts of men and the clamor of collapsing timber. Étienne's breath fogs in the cold air as he watches Lord Savaric wade deeper into the flood he created. The warlord's red cloak drags behind him, heavy with water and mud. Yet he pushes forward with the stubborn fury of a man who has never known defeat. Knights splash after him, their shields raised, their armor groaning under the weight of the mire. Each step is a brutal labor. Each movement sends ripples across the rising flood. But forward they come. Étienne wipes his face with a trembling hand. This was supposed to break them, not provoke them. He hears a familiar voice. "Étienne, up here." Sir Roland stands atop the mill bridge, rain drenching his mail hauberk, torchlight flickering across his stern features. A handful of castle guards cluster behind him, bows in hand, arrows nocked but not loosed. They stare at the valley in disbelief. Roland steps forward, eyes fixed on the struggling enemy below. By all the saints, they should have fallen back. Instead, they march into the river like madmen. Étienne nods, chest heaving. "They won't give up, my lord." Roland turns toward him. His tone softens. "You've done more than any man could ask of you. The flood has bought us precious hours." Étienne glances at Savaric's advancing shape, a hulking dark figure carving a path through waist-deep water. The flood slows him, but it does not stop him. "Hours won't be enough," Étienne says quietly. Roland studies him. For a moment, there is a spark respect for a peasant he once ignored. Then the spark fades into urgency. Roland signals to the archers. Loose arrows hiss into the downpour. The shafts streak through the air, spattering into the water around Savaric's men. A few find marks, a cry here, a stumble there, but the distance is too far, the wind too wild, the armor too thick. And the floodwater swallows most arrowheads before they can strike cleanly. Savaric raises his shield, shrugging off the volleys like gnats. He looks up toward the bridge, and even through the storm, Étienne sees the gleam in the warlord's eyes. Defiance, challenge, and something worse. Certainty. Savaric points his sword toward the castle. The meaning is unmistakable. "I will reach your gates." Then he shouts a command to his nearest captain, a man with a braided beard and a dented helm. The captain bellows back to the troops, "Bring forward the ladders. The mud be damned." Étienne's stomach drops. Ladders, they don't need the road. They don't need the tower. They only need to get close enough. The castle walls loom not far behind the mill, solid stone rising from the rocky hill that anchors the valley. If the enemy reaches the slope, even a handful of determined men could be enough to force a foothold. Étienne grips the bridge rail, knuckles whitening. Roland sees it too. We must clear the valley before they reach higher ground. Étienne shakes his head. Clear it, my lord. The flood was all I had. A guard calls from behind them. More men coming down the ridge, 24 at least. Étienne looks back to the valley floor, and what he sees turns his blood cold. The water is still rising. The first surge filled the mud. The second overwhelmed the ruts. But now the valley floor is turning into a broad, swirling lake, the kind that pulls at ankles, knees, even armor. And the men in the center are losing the fight. One knight slips and vanishes beneath the brown water. A squire lunges after him, but is swept away by the current. Another soldier cries out as his shield floats from his grasp. Yet Savaric pushes on. He drags a half-drowned soldier upright with one arm and orders his men to follow. Étienne stares in disbelief. How is he still standing? Roland answers quietly. The man has never retreated in his life. The castle guards exchange uneasy glances. Rain soaks their cloaks. Thunder groans above. Étienne looks at the floodgate. The mill pond is nearly empty now, the water spent. There will be no third surge. The valley will drown the vanguard, but Savaric and his elite are almost through. Roland grips Étienne's shoulder. You have done enough, he says. Get inside the walls. You are a hero tonight, even if you don't see it. But Étienne doesn't move. His eyes drift to the mill wheel, a colossal wooden circle half submerged, still turning from the force of the release, groaning under the strain. Its massive beams creak, sway, and crack. A terrible idea sparks in Étienne's mind. An insane, impossible idea. The mill wheel is anchored by stone piers and a single load-bearing beam, a support weakened by years of rot, and made worse by the violent rush of water. If that beam breaks, the entire mill structure, wheel, housing, and all could collapse into the channel, blocking it, redirecting it, sending the last of the floodwater straight toward the slope Savaric is climbing. Roland follows Étienne's gaze. What are you thinking? Étienne swallows. His voice is barely above a whisper. There's still one more trick the mill can do. Roland stiffens. That would take the whole wheel down. Étienne meets his eyes. And it might take Savaric with it. For the first time that night, Roland the Knight hesitates, torn between duty and fear of the unknown. Étienne does not hesitate. He is already running toward the mill house, soaked, breath-ragged, heart-pounding. Because if this doesn't work, the enemy will reach the gate, and the castle will fall. The mill groans like a wounded beast as Étienne sprints across the slick stones toward the wheel housing. Rain lashes sideways, soaking his tunic, turning every plank beneath his feet into a trap of slippery wood. Thunder cracks overhead, shaking the rafters. The old structure is barely holding together, which is exactly why he chose it. Behind him, Roland shouts, Étienne, wait. But Étienne doesn't stop. He throws himself inside the mill house, the smell of wet grain and old timber filling his lungs. The wheel turns sluggishly now, slowed by debris and the strain of the floodwater. Each rotation sends a pulse of vibration through the floorboards, a reminder of how fragile everything is. You can almost feel the mill trembling beneath your own feet. Étienne grabs a lantern and holds it high. The flame flickers wildly, illuminating the massive support beam at the wheel's axis, the one piece of timber that keeps the entire structure upright. It's cracked. A deep, jagged wound runs through the heartwood, opening and closing with every slow rotation of the wheel. Water gushes through the slats, splattering his face with icy droplets. Étienne wipes his brow. This will work, he tells himself. It has to. He rushes to the corner where he keeps his tools, a mallet, a worn chisel, an old iron wedge. Tools for fixing a mill, not destroying one. But tonight, they will do the opposite. A distant roar rumbles through the valley. Étienne steps outside for a heartbeat and sees the terrifying truth. Savaric and 24 of his elite men have reached the rising slope, the one area where the floodwaters are shallower. Mud drenches them from helm to boot, but they're climbing. Gaining ground, getting closer. Roland and his archers fire down at them, arrows hissing into the storm. Some strike shields, others splinter on armor. Savaric's. Men raise their mantlets and continue their slow, grinding ascent. And Étienne knows if they reach the rocky incline, the flood will no longer matter. He ducks back inside. The wheel moans again, and this time the floor visibly shudders. Water pours through the mill race like a dying river, losing strength but still strong enough to push. Étienne places the wedge at the crack in the beam and raises his mallet. A voice behind him gasps, "Étienne." "Don't." Roland stands in the doorway, soaked, breathless, torchlight flickering across his soaked armor. "If you break that beam, the entire wheel could crush you where you stand." Étienne nods. "I know." Roland steps forward. "You've already saved us. The valley is a lake. Savaric is slowed." "But not stopped," Étienne replies. He looks Roland in the eye, not as a peasant speaking to a noble, but as a man speaking to another man who understands the stakes. If he reaches your wall, if he plants even one ladder, your knights will die. The castle will fall. And all of this, he gestures to the flooded valley, will have meant nothing. Roland says nothing, because he knows Étienne is right. Étienne positions the wedge again and lifts the mallet. The wheel clanks, the beam groans. Outside, a knight screams as he sinks into the mud. Another shouts encouragement as they haul each other toward higher ground. Savaric bellows for his men to push. Étienne swings. Crack! The sound echoes like a gunshot inside the mill house. Dust drifts from the rafters. The beam quivers. Étienne swings again. Crack! This time the split widens, the grain tearing apart. Water sprays from the pressure, misting the air with cold droplets. The wheel lurches. Roland grabs a rafter for balance. Étienne. It's coming down. Étienne lifts the mallet a final time. He hesitates, not from fear, but because the ground shakes hard enough to steal his breath. He knows what's happening even before Roland turns toward the door in horror. Savaric has reached the rocky incline. Étienne slams the mallet down. Crack! The support beam snaps. The mill house shakes violently as the weight of the wheel shifts. For a moment, everything freezes. The creak of timbers, the rumble of water, the cries of men outside. Then the entire left side of the mill collapses. The massive wooden wheel tears free from its housing and topples sideways into the channel with a roar like thunder. Splintered beams crash into the water, blocking the race entirely. The flood, all the pressure still stored behind the half-empty pond, has nowhere else to go. It explodes sideways. A torrent bursts from the broken mill, redirected down the rocky incline where Savaric and his elite troops are climbing. The blast hits them like a living hammer, a wall of water and debris that sweeps men off their feet and hurls them back into the depths of the valley. Savaric is thrown backward, shield spinning from his grasp. His war cry becomes a drowning choke as the redirected flood knocks him into the swirling mire. Étienne watches from the ruin of the mill house, chest heaving. The flood is no longer just a trap. It is a weapon. Roland stares at the destruction, stunned. By God, Étienne. You've broken the valley itself, but Étienne barely hears him. Because through the crashing water, through the screams and chaos, through the storm's deafening rumble, he sees something that makes his blood run cold. Savaric is still alive, bruised, soaked, half buried in mud, but rising. Impossible. Madness, but real, and he is not alone. Two of his captains struggle upright beside him, clinging to debris, dragging themselves free of the torrent. The flood has shattered the assault, but it has not killed the man leading it. Étienne grips the shattered beam for support. The water bought them minutes, maybe an hour. But the warlord is coming again, and next time he won't let the valley decide the battle.